There's approximately 900 organizations connected, and because of our peering arrangements, we've got a little bit more than 180 gigabit a second worth of external connectivity. Point to note, we run IPv4 and IPv6 native, including multicast for IPv4 and multicast for IPv6 internally, but not IPv6 internet-enabled multicast yet, but we're working on that. So this graph shows the amount of traffic we have to deal with. Now, I'm not trying to say we're a massive ISP, because we're not, but we're a non-trivial ISP. We deal with a fair bit of data. Unfortunately, this graph ends at the end of last year, so it's carried on quite a bit, so you've got to imagine that. At the moment, we're probably dealing with we're receiving around about 7 petabytes worth of traffic a month, and we're sending around about 3 petabytes of traffic from our autonomous system to the internet. You'll notice we've got very, 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 very seasonal traffic. Because they're education and research users, they follow the school timetable. And we've got 3 terms in the UK. So the biggest dip is between the ends of the year, and it dips considerably in the main holiday season. So I was told to put in a slide in on who actually connects to JANET. Because FE, if you're not down with the lingo, is the majority of our connections. They're places which, they're sites where you'll go to do courses after your compulsory education. And they could be in anything from bricklaying to computing to sheep farming. HE, they're going to be universities, local authorities and schools. There's a low number of them because we'll often put in some big pipes into a local authority and they'll handle the connections to all the local schools. Self-funded, they still fall within the remit of education and research, and dedicated research places. So in total, if you work it out, there's potentially 18 million plus potential users. Now I stress potentially, because we put big pipes into schools, an average FE site would get anywhere, well, they used to have a 10 meg connection, they're getting 100 megs now. The universities generally used to have 1 gig, they're being migrated up to 10 gigs. There's 18 million potential users, but we don't know exactly how many are using them on a particular day, because there might be 25,000, 50,000 people at a big university, and they're obviously not going to use it all on the same day. So some key figures about our network and what we have to deal with. Approximately 100 routers in the core, 300 regional area routers. We directly manage 400 end organization routers. There is a lot more connections, you'll notice, but a lot of the sites let us look after their router. Something called the managed router service, because we don't want them to have flaky equipment on their end, and we recommend it if they haven't got the capabilities to run what I'd call a proper router. In total, around about 1,500 circuits make up JANET, and unfortunately, they're responsible for the majority of our outage time. You know, people either putting a building in the way of a bit of fiber or anything like that. So as mentioned, key points, 18 million plus users from 900 connected organizations, and they're nearly all education and research. JANET's a little bit older than 25 years old now, slightly older than me. And originally, we were only a research network, and the backbone was running at 9.6 kilobits a second. Today, as I speak, the network's running at 40 gigabit a second. And because we find that network traffic on our network is doubling roughly every 18 months, we're going to have a need for 100 gigabit a second sometime, you can work it out, sometime around about 2011. So we've already completed a pre-standards trial of 100 gigabit a second Ethernet over 103 kilometers worth of fiber. Because we're always chasing and we're always trying to get the fastest network speeds, what I find is the traditional, like, security in a box appliances where you can go to a mainstream vendor and you can buy a 1 gig or a 10 gig, you know, IPS, IDS, email scrubber, stuff that looks a bad stuff on a network in a box. That's just not available at 40 gigabit a second yet. We could go out and hack together a solution which would look into it. But again, in a couple of years, we're looking to move to 100 gigabit a second. So that kind of technology isn't really for us. So about JANET CSIRT, it's the team that I'm a member of. So I'm not going to go through this totally, but because you're all a reasonably technical audience. But CSIRT, IRT, and CERT, they're all essentially the same thing. They all respond to security incidents on networks. Essentially, we coordinate within our community and with other CERTs and some other ISPs. And most of the time, we're providing advice and assistance in relation to security incidents with confidentiality. The confidentiality is a key point. a lot of sites, you know, if you were a reasonably big site or even a smaller site which didn't have the technical expertise to manage it yourself, if you did have a security incident, you're not exactly going to post it on a forum saying, guys, my web server's compromised, what do I do? So the confidentiality is a key point. It's having actually somebody they can turn to and trust. And we deal with incidents from all these institutions. So most of the time, we've already dealt with similar incidents. So what's the point in cooperating? Why do we cooperate? Well, as mentioned earlier, security threats are real. They happen all the time. They happen so often that they're a totally normal part of operations. They're nothing exceptional. We deal with hundreds of incidents a day. And unfortunately, or you might say fortunately, more and more parts of academia, like universities, they're having to act more like businesses because the government's making them do it or they're trying to get some more money. So they're worried about things. So in particular, they're worried about DOS attacks. There's a certain time of the year in the UK when students start to apply for universities and try to get in. Let's say if a website was taken down and it was a university website at that particular time of year, that would really hammer their student intake. That would really affect them. And even more important is reputation. If, let's say, hypothetically, an oil company paid a prestigious university £1 million to do some research into carbon change or something, if that data was compromised, that data might be under a non-disclosure agreement, they could be directly penalized, but other institutions and other people who wanted to do research would have probably immediately discredited that institution. That would really, really harm their income. And I suppose, unfortunately, securing potentially 18 million users is not something we can do alone. And we find, by far, the most effective response to any computer security incident on our network is peer communications. So this is the official blurb from the website. You can all read. I'm not going to go through it all. But essentially, we take the lead on JANET security policy. So we say what the best practices are, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. We coordinate security responses. That's our main role, coordinating. And we also develop a couple of security resources. So because we're an ISP, we're not like a traditional enterprise. And I find a lot of security material out there is aimed kind of at enterprises. So we've got absolutely no control over an end system. No matter how virus-ridden or what was happening on an end system, I would be well outside of my remit to actually go up to that user and fix it or patch that machine. I can't do that. I have no control. I can't touch it. We also provide an unfiltered network. And when I say unfiltered, generally pretty much every IP on the internet, even stuff that is notoriously bad, we don't filter. We occasionally filter a couple of IPs, but they will be in a direct response to a security incident which we're dealing with. But they're not going to be long-term blocks. Generally, we'll work for a month or a couple of months, and we try and solve the problem. So ports such as 25, some ISPs block that, and ports you shouldn't even need on the WAN, such as 445 and 139. They're all open. Also, because it's not our data, and we didn't create the data, stuff like deep packet inspection, it's not practical at 40 gigs, as I mentioned. But because it's not our data, it might not even be legal. So because it's not our data and it's not our end systems, it's questionable whether we could even do things like scanning on a large scale. I'm not saying it is illegal in the UK. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying it is or isn't legal, but it's not something we want to do because it has slightly grey area and we try to be the good guys. As I mentioned, security incidents are normal and it all comes together because we work on the basis of operational trust. Incidents on JANET tend to follow a particular lifestyle. Hopefully, most of the time we're giving out advice, telling them how to prevent